that I can refer back to it later. All right, so real fast, I do like to just do roll call so it's on the minutes. Let's see, Jenna Goodman-Campbell. Not sure I see her on there. Dave Johnson. I know
Here.
Hi, Dave. Lisa.
I'm here.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Scott.
Yeah, I'm here.
And then Kathy, we know. Audrey, Jesse.
I'm here.
Okay. Karna.
Here.
Hi, Karna. Matt Gillette.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Moe. Not yet, but I believe she is attending and she probably has to go a little early too. Alexis. Okay. Ryan Jennings. No, Ryan. Okay. Bill Bernardi.
I'm here.
Hi, Bill. Sarah Santa.
I'm here.
Hi, Sarah. And Mike. Did you get in?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. All right. And real quick, the meeting protocols. And this one will be a little different because we're not using the Excel chart, but we're just going to go through the draft and I'll probably make notes on the draft as we go through it. Whatever we don't have like a majority vote on, then we can just do the raise the hand in support of a proposed option. And just a reminder for everyone that's listening to our advisory group discussion today, only those that I just mentioned on the roll call can raise their hand to vote in the and participate in the discussion. When we do participate, as always, let's just be respectful and supportive of everyone's opinions. And I do encourage everyone that is on the advisory group to participate so we can hear from everyone on each of the topics if possible. So I'm going to close that out and then share my screen. Bear with me here for a second. I'm going to stop sharing me and then, okay, so it's this one. Oh, one more second. Okay, everyone see that? And I can probably make it a little bit bigger.
We can see it, Pauline. I'll let others say if they need it to be. That's great.
Okay, I'll do right there. All right, and this is again different. You know, it's not line by line. So if you have a question and I'm just running on, just raise your hand, link and watch for me. And we can stop, pause if I'm going too fast through any of this. So today we're talking about the cottage cluster developments. As you know, in the development code, we already have a cottage code development section. This is going to be similar but different. So it'll give two different development options eventually for applicant to propose or to use. So one will be the cottage development that's in the code today, and then the draft that we're looking at today, which is a cottage cluster development. I did do some amendments to the definitions. Cottage is already in the code, so you can see what's new is underlined. I just need to reference this new section that we're going to be creating. And then I cleaned up cottage cluster to be consistent with what we're doing. Because we have a definition for cottage housing development, which is the one that's in the code today, I put in a definition for cottage cluster development and then referred to this section. So it's basically a brief description and then it refers you on to the actual section to get the standards. Any questions on the definitions? Looks like Mike and then Bill.
Hi. I tried to do my homework and compare your code to the 3.8.500. And I tried to imagine myself as a builder trying to decide, well, which one do I use? They read very, very similar. So maybe right out of the gate, you can explain why would a builder pick one versus the other? Because frankly, I had a hard time figuring it out. Thank you.
Well, I think it's going to be based on the standards. That might be revised a little bit different. Depending on what we adopt for parking might be a little bit different. They are limited to the footprint of 900 square feet. So if a developer is looking to do 1,000 square foot single stories, they would not use what we're proposing today. The OARs and the model code also have a strict addition of 200 square feet that you can propose towards a garage. But if you want 400 square foot garage, that 200 comes off that 9. So it really gets down to the details for a developer on probably most importantly the product that they're going to develop and then the layout.
So I think maybe my question's premature. I guess we should wait till we see what happens when we're done going through the siding standards.
True. Yeah, I mean, because it can change and there is going to be similarities, but we need to have both so that we can keep the square footage that we allow in the code today. Bill?
Yeah, so the current definition for a cottage housing development indicates that individual lots are created for each cottage. And when we talked about this at the last meeting, you clarified that the new state cottage cluster would allow either individual lots or a common lot with all of the cottages and the shared open space. And it seems to me that a statement to that effect ought to be in the definition, just to be clear, because that might be an important distinction, for a developer.
I can add that to cottage cluster.
So cottages may be on individual lots or on a common lot with the shared open space.
Yeah, or that's more of a standard and I should just strike it out of the cottage housing development and add clarity in the actual chapter.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is in the definition for cottage cluster development, the third sentence is really redundant where it says a cottage cluster development may contain more than one cluster. That's what the first sentence says.
Okay, yep, I can fix that. I'm just going to strike
That's
it
all.
right now. And that's also, I believe, in the standards below when we talk about clusters. And you have to forgive me when we talk about this one, it gets confusing because it is called a cottage cluster development. And there's some intermixing of cluster and courtyards and numbers. So as we get through it, Ethan's on the phone too, so he can help provide some answers when we have them. All right, seeing no more hands, I'm gonna go on. Okay, so this is all new, so I didn't underline it all because that gets pretty busy looking. The applicability, what I'm proposing, because cottage cluster housing, it should be cluster, has to be allowed where we allow single family developments, single family dwelling units. So we allow single family detached in the RL, RS, and RM. We don't in the high density. So I did not propose putting this in the high density. I only proposed it to be consistent with House Bill 2001. Any comments to that one? Okay. The approval process, this is completely different than what we do today for our cottage code. We require either it's reviewed through the subdivision process. If there's not a subdivision and it's just one parent parcel and individual units on the parent parcel, then we review it through a type 2 site plan review. That way you can make sure all the standards are being met. The OARs do not allow that. You have to process this unless Ethan's going to correct me, the same way we process a single family detached dwelling. So that bumps it down to a, or lowers it down to a type 1 review and not a type 2. Mike?
I'm glad Ethan's listening, so hopefully he can give us some insight on this one. I attended the neighborhood meeting on one of the projects you sent us as examples, the one that is the Habitat for Humanity project off of, oh, it's on the west side, not far from College Way. I attended that meeting. It was a very productive meeting because the neighborhood provided useful information to the developer so that the developer basically avoided problems down the road. I have a hard time understanding how that neighborhood meeting could be construed as unreasonable delay, because when you look at the process of an application, it doesn't slow down the application. It's something that can be done quickly without adding to the critical path of a project. So I guess my question is, will the applicant still need to have the neighborhood meeting? And if you want details, I can explain some of the things we saved the developer from making some mistakes on.
If it is a subdivision, there will be a neighborhood meeting. If it is not a subdivision, there will be no neighborhood meeting because we don't have that for just a single family detached dwelling. Most of these that we've seen, I think all of them actually, are a subdivision. Ethan?
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. Yeah, so your analysis is spot on in terms of the approval process that can be applied to cottage clusters in comparison to single-family detached homes. So that process, at a minimum, should be the same. There's also nothing in the rules that prohibits a city from adopting an alternative path that is not clear and objective to the development of cottage clusters. So there could be this kind of two-path system where one, the property owner is able to go through that clear and objective path, but also there is another path that would include additional types of neighborhood meetings and review process. But there must be at least that clear and objective path that's identical to the single-family detached home path.
Okay. Mike, your hand's still up? Okay, so I sent you, Ethan, an email on this, but I think I figured it out. There is a density minimum, I believe, in the minimum compliance, the OARs, that says you have to allow 4 cottages per acre. I don't know why I didn't get this, how it had aligned with the lot sizes, but because there's no maximum, that significantly reduces the lot sizes. So density would be 4 cottages per acre, and there'd be no maximum density. And that's pretty much straight out of the rules.
That's right. The way, sorry.
Oh, no, please.
The way that the legislature defined a cottage cluster is kind of what led us to that 4 cottages per acre. So their definition means a grouping of no fewer than 4 detached housing units per acre, and then it goes on. So that was kind of we were limited by the statute at that.
So is that right in the bill?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, good reminder. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So then there is a minimum, and help me out, Ethan. So there's also a minimum for the cluster. So when we talk about a cluster, it means a group of cottages around the courtyard. That cluster has to have at least 3. Right.
So this is kind of talking about, what actually constitutes a cluster of cottages. And so the city in OAR, the city is allowed to kind of set their own minimum number of cottages within a cottage cluster. And we're using all sorts of overlapping terms here, so I'm sorry if it's confusing. And city can limit the number of cottages in a cottage cluster to either 3, 4, or 5.
And that's the minimum. And the group talked about it last week, and we said, well, why not just start at 3? If a developer, wants to do 3 and then 5 and 6, they can, as long as they're meeting the minimums.
Mhm.
Any comments on that? Okay, lot sizes. So here's the 2 options that Bill had identified that was in the definition, that you can either do the development site and just place cottage clusters that are on a single lot, or you can break them up and have individual parcels, which is what we primarily see on our current cottage developments in town. So if you did a single lot, I referred to just the standard lot size for a single family detached dwelling. I believe that was one of the options. Maybe it was in the model code or OAR. So in the RL, if you were going to do a cottage site, it would be a 10,000 square foot minimum lot. And then in the RS and RM, it would be 4,000. Now, even though we're saying 4,000, it would probably be, it might be unlikely that you actually see this on a 4,000. I don't have the skills to draw this up, but by the time you put the houses on it and whatever parking we come up with and the access and the required courtyard and open space, you'll probably have to bump up that lot. So it's almost like the development standards will dictate how big the lot will be. Bill?
Yeah, so I actually did a couple of sketches because I was curious, what could you get on 4,000 square feet? And on a 40 by 100 foot lot, it just really didn't work with a 15-foot wide courtyard, and setbacks. And but on a 50-foot lot, you could get 3 cottages, one about 400 square feet footprint, and 2 about 600 each. But when I did that, I looked at it and I thought, well, why wouldn't you just call it a triplex and not have to deal with the requirements related to the courtyard? And that didn't allow for any parking unless it was under the units. So the 4,000 seems pretty, it seems like it would be pretty hard to achieve. And even if you did, I don't know why you wouldn't just call it a triplex.
I think you're right, Bill. I think these are options for a developer. And if a developer is looking at all the options, the triplex would probably be the way to go.
So I don't know if anybody else has, issues about that, but I guess the question would be, what's the advantage of setting it at 4 instead of 5, or, something that would be a bit more realistic?
Looks like Kathy has a hand up.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, there's not a lot you can fit on that 4,000 square foot. That's sort of a typical lot size for doing a small lot subdivision if it's a single family home. So if you try to imagine 3 cottages and the common space, it is a little small. But the only thing I want to say, triplex versus 3 individual cottages, if you can sell each cottage separately, it's a lot more valuable than trying to sell a triplex. A triplex would be too expensive for an individual to buy. So there might be a reason that a developer would prefer to do individual units. But I would agree that 4,000 square foot is pretty tiny, and I don't see exactly how that would work. That's all.
Well, for clarity, Kathy, this is 3 cottages on 1 lot, which would just be like a triplex with 3 units on 1 lot.
Oh, I see.
My guess is they'd make them condos and then sell them privately, like we've been seeing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, you could probably bump it up more than 4,000, but if you kept it at 4,000, that just leaves a lot of leeway to whatever can happen.
So in the the minimum compliance, it says that if the minimum lot size in the same zone for a single family detached is 7,000 square feet or less, which ours is, the minimum lot size for a cottage cluster may be no greater than 7,000. So if we wanted to play around with this 4,000, we can go up to 7,000.
Pauline, it looks like Matt has a hand up.
Okay.
Hi there. I just was brainstorming a little bit differences between triplex and cottages. Is there a minimum square footage for triplex
No.
per unit?
No, we'll probably have lot coverage. I don't know that we're going to have FAR.
Okay,
But there's
perfect.
No minimum or no maximum either. So is there any interest? I mean, we can keep 4. If someone's lucky enough to do it, great. We can increase it. I know, Mike.
Sometimes we get so hung up on one citing standard at a time. It's going to be very interesting to see the next meeting where we look at the code and look at the interaction between all these standards to really be sure what can or can't be done. So I just would caution us to not get hung up on this first time through the code. And I say that for my own benefit too, because I have in the past on some of these meetings get hung up on one specific number.
All right, so I'll leave it at 4 unless I hear any other comments. Okay. Then we are going to talk about, well, let's see, it says a development site must meet the minimum lot width depth standards that apply to the detached single family dwellings corresponding zone. That's right out of the rule. So basically 4,000, they look at the requirements for lot depth and width, and the parent site, the development site, has to comply with that. We've used that before. If a developer is going to put these on their individual lots, I put that there's no minimum lot size or dimensions for a cottage located on its own lot or parcel. Thoughts? Wow, we're gonna move right through this. Okay.
Starbucks must have sold out of the decaf this morning or something. I'm shocked, y'all. Is it nap time?
Okay, so also no lot coverage or floor area ratio requirements for the cottages. And I believe I should have taken better notes on this. I don't think you can propose that. Is that correct, Ethan?
That is correct. Yeah, the
Okay.
the other citing standards like setbacks and building footprints and all of that other stuff will really dictate the coverage.
Okay.
Availability.
So the setbacks and building separation, Mike, you probably noticed, because I put a note. These are more flexible, and they came out of a discussion with a small group when we updated the current cottage development in the Ben code. This was a discussion with developers that have either developed using our code, like Audrey, and then it also included, I think, a representative from Hayden who's interested in developing cottages and has elsewhere, and Jesse, because he's also had experience with his hiatus project. And we looked at what were some of the issues that they had to comply with. And one of them was the setbacks at that time. So we amended the Ben development code to create 2 different types of setbacks. So we look at the parent site before it's developed with cottages, or the parent site before it's actually subdivided. And those are considered the perimeter setbacks. So we did the 10-foot front setback like we do for a single family home. And then the rear and side setbacks for like a single family detached home is 5 feet. And then the interior building between each unit is 6 feet between the eaves of the cottages. The only thing I changed here, we have 10 in the current code. And I saw that the, I believe it's the model code or the ORERs, one of them has 6 feet. So I didn't want to be more restrictive than what was proposed in those codes. So comparative, this is what the model code said was front was 10, so we're good there. Sides 5, but rear's 10. We don't do 10-foot setbacks for rear and side. So that's why we use 5 there. And then this was where they had the separation of 6.
Yeah, and that's 6 feet. That's 6 feet. Sorry, Pauline, I'm really just
Oh, that's
jumping
okay.
in here. That 6 feet is really pulled from the building code, the state building code. So that's the minimum amount of separation you would need before sprinklers, I believe. So that's what we
Yeah,
got.
it has to do with fire rating.
Yep.
And then Bill and then Audrey.
Yeah, this is just a brief edit, but in the paragraph before where it says perimeter setbacks, use the abbreviation CHD. And I think that's been borrowed from the other.
Thank you. I thought I caught most of those. Sorry, I did this on my day off, so I was in a little bit of a hurry. Okay. Audrey?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that on that building separation, that I don't remember the exact reason for it, but I ended up having to move a house and shuffle things around last minute on the James Drive cottage cluster because they wouldn't let me get closer than 5 feet to the side of the lot with the foundation. And so it ended up being 10 feet anyway between buildings. And some reason they said that couldn't be changed.
Well, when you submitted yours, Audrey, you were under the old code, so it should have been 10 on the rear and sides, and we
No,
reduced that down to 5.
This is inside of the cluster between buildings.
Did we change that with that last code update?
No, it was allowed to be. You could have the eaves closer because or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it still had that separation, but I put one 3 feet to the line and the other one further off so I could get the outside personal space, whatever, 200 square feet to the side yard because I was limited on front yard between that and the lava outcropping. And so I biased them towards one closer to the property line, and I was made to move that to 5 feet away from the property line regardless. I just didn't want people to get in there thinking they could be really close together, have it split into property lines, and then find out none of their homes fit because they're going to have to be 5 feet away from the line unless there's some way to get around that.
So you're saying that building code requires 5 feet from a property line? I haven't heard that before. Because we do 3 and 7 for courtyard housing. I know Polish is building something like that right now up off Shevlin.
Maybe my brain is failing me and it was 3 feet, or I had it at 2 or something, and then I had to go to 3. That could be. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Audrey,
Oh, no.
Audrey, for residential, it's 3 feet from the property line, but even then you can go down to 0 if you want to do fire rating and stuff.
Yeah, but with the small structures, that cancels out all the light. Yeah, that could be done then. It's just I couldn't with those and still make them well lit, good hands, or whatever.
Looks like Mike. Oh, never mind. Mike, you're coming and going.
All right. So it looks, seems like we're supportive then of that. All right, so here's the average unit size. This is different than what we require in the code. Oh, good, Ethan, your hand's already up because I think I sent you an email on this. Ethan?
Oh, I was gonna wait until you. Well, okay, I'll jump in. Yeah, Pauline, you sent me an email about this draft code here. So I wanted to just touch on a couple of things. So on sub 2 here, the maximum cottage building footprint is 900 square feet. So the bill, and this is probably just something that we as DLCD need to work a little bit better on just communicating. It's easy to say, it's just easier to say that the maximum building footprint is 900, but the bill actually states that the footprint be less than 900 square feet. So I would just recommend using that same language, that it can't actually be 900.0, you know, 899.9 is acceptable, that kind of thing. So I would just, you know, use that same exact language that the maximum building footprint is to be less than 900 square feet.
Good,
Um,
good, thank you.
Yep, and then your average floor area is definitely an option, something that the city definitely can consider. And then just a clarifying point, and I think something that you had said earlier in this meeting, a city may choose to exempt 200 square feet from that building footprint if they are interested in doing that. That is not a requirement that the city allow that exemption for a garage, for an attached garage. So in a scenario where the city said, look, we don't feel like that's a good exemption from that maximum building footprint. And so we're going to cap both the unit itself and any type of attached garage at 900 square feet and call it, at the less than 900 square feet and call it good. Or the city has the option to say you can build a structure that is 900 square feet in living space, but then a 200 square foot garage. And that's fine because we're exempting that 200 square foot garage. But those are options. That's not a requirement, just to clarify that.
And for this group, I had sent that question because we actually exempt 400 in our code today. And the way I read it is we can go up to 200. We cannot propose a 400-foot exemption.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm guessing we're going to do the 200. I just want to make sure we can't do any more. Let's see. So let me just go through this real fast and then I'll get to the hands. So the average unit size for a cottage cluster is 1,400 square foot per dwelling unit, which I think adds a lot of flexibility because you can have some smaller ones, some larger ones, as long as the average is 1,400. The issue I see with this is that at the time of land division, or I guess minimum development standards review, unless you know the exact square footages that are going on each of the lots or for each cottage, we do not have a way to track the average over a couple year build out. So that's why I added the units must be submitted as part of the cottage cluster development application. Does that, I don't know if I explained that well, but if we don't get the units up front and we have planning techs or building techs reviewing the cottages through the building permits, they're not going to be able to go back and track the square footages that have been submitted over the past couple of years for the cottages and decide if this is okay. Kathy?
Thanks. I initially raised my hand and Ethan pretty much answered it, but I wanted to make sure the 900 square feet didn't include a one-car garage. It's very often it's going to be the case where there is a garage tucked into the unit. And so I do believe we need to make sure we're clear that a 200 square foot garage is exempt from that amount. Oftentimes there will be detached garages or surface parking, but there may be in certain circumstances a single car garage attached to these. So we need to allow for that.
And I am checking really fast. I'm wondering if, oh, right here is the 200.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I have it in there.
Yeah.
Sorry about the scrolling.
And then another piece on that too is it's a 200 square foot exemption. So a property owner could go in and build a 2-stall garage. They just can only exempt the 200 square feet from that calculation of 900. So the other portion of that, the remaining portion, goes into that 900 maximum. Does that make sense?
Yep. So instead of a 900, they might have a 700 square foot dwelling unit and a 400 square foot garage.
Yeah, right.
Looks like Audrey, then Mike.
Quick comment on the garage thing. So just anybody who then puts a garage on there, it's going to take away from that square footage of the unit because that's not going to meet. You're not going to build a 10 by 20 car and get it in there and get out of it. But the main thing was when I looked at the average square feet, two thoughts came up. One, similar to what Pauline was saying, is, well, let's say even if you could track it, then you could have a cluster of homes where the first one essentially to add on gets the benefit. And then if you cannot add on for a while, you could be stuck not being able to, which seems like a kind of odd situation. I really love the idea of being able to average it out if you're doing it all up front, and that can really be advantageous. But also, I was always wanting to do clusters where it gave people the opportunity to build small homes on individual lots in a community. And this would mean you really couldn't do that because you aren't going to know what's going on each of those lots. And I'm not really sure how to address that, but I just wanted to bring that thought up.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't provide the average up front, we'll have to say a maximum of 1,400 square feet, which I need to add that, depending on how this conversation goes. But who is next? I think Mike.
So several things. I want to give Audrey a suggestion. I remodeled a commercial building, and as we started leasing out spaces, we knew that the code only allowed us a certain amount of square footage total for the whole building. So the first one in, if they stuck the monster sign up, what's left over for the second or the third or the fourth tenant? So as a landlord, as an owner, we had to go in and say, you're going to be limited by a certain amount of square footage on your sign so you don't steal from somebody else. So if there is a condition that, well, I don't know if this is something that could be conditioned, or is this just good best management practices for the developer, is don't give away the farm to the first guy. Second thing is the 1,400 square foot. I want to just plant the seed, so when we have a conversation, which probably isn't today on parking, there was the example that I pointed out on 9th Street. You can actually take that duplex, split it in half, and create a 3-story, 1,400 square foot unit that has 4 bedrooms. Then I remembered the conversation last week where Kathy seemed to be real concerned with Bill's idea of let's just do 1 parking space across the board. It seemed like Kathy agreed that there would be some number of bedrooms where you have to apply a little common sense. This is really not probably even up for discussion today, since parking probably will be tabled. But down the road, remember, you can put the half of that duplex is less than 1,400 square feet, and it has 4 bedrooms. So that's it.
Kathy?
Yeah, to answer Audrey's concerns, if you're not wanting to develop the entire cottage cluster at one time, I think you can, on each lot deed, record a maximum size that a unit could be on each lot. And that way you can, as you design it, you know, if you have a smaller lot, you have a smaller square footage associated with that particular lot, and larger, and you know, you're going to have to lay out your lots in your subdivision with specific dimensions. So I think you can address the issue. I admire that what she wants to do and let people build their own homes, which is great. It usually doesn't work that way, but I think it's possible to do the average. That's
So
all.
I'm going to ask Kathy or our staff if that is an option, because we don't, the plan text I don't think track deeds to see how big a lot can be. What we possibly could do, and with the new city view, again, I need to ask, is if we can put a flag on these lots that are created that has a note that the dwelling unit has a size restriction. So I'll do some follow up on that idea.
And then Bill?
Yeah, two thoughts. One on the topic that was just being discussed. It seems like you can offer an option. You could say either you can submit the entire plan up front and average it, or if you're doing them one at a time, then here's a maximum. But my question really is about the 1,400 square feet. I see that came out of the model code, but I have no sense of what that's based on or related to. Why not 1,200? Why not 1,500? Where did that come from? Or what's the rationale for it?
Ethan, do you have any input on that?
Yeah. So basically, the conversation about cottage clusters, the intent behind these types of units is that they're typically smaller, hence the building square footage, the building footprint limitation. We were going through the rulemaking process. Did we want to allow basically a bunch of 1,800 square foot, 2-story, 900 square foot building footprint homes in a cottage cluster? That doesn't really seem like a cottage anymore. And so really the 1,400 was born out of, what is the right cutoff point there? Kind of a story and a half is, I guess, where we landed. And that comes from conversations we had with Angela Planning and Echo Northwest, our consultants on the project.
Looks like Scott.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you had just mentioned footprint. Is this is square feet, not footprint, right?
That's
footprint.
correct. Yeah. But
Okay.
so 1,400 square feet in
Yes.
a total dwelling, and then 900 square foot is kind of the maximum. Well, less than 900 square foot is the maximum for the building footprint. So if you
Okay,
two-story
all right.
that 900 square foot, you get 1,800. Yeah.
And the minimum compliance says the city may limit the minimum and maximum size of a dwelling unit. So we don't have to use the 14, and then the 14 came from the model code.
That's correct.
So I don't see any more hands raised. I did hear a couple comments about the 1,400, so we're going to do a poll. So what I've my notes before we do that is 2 options. One, you can provide the averages up front during the application review. You can just say we're just going to do a maximum of 1,400 on each lot. And then I'll check in on Kathy's suggestion on deed restrictions and whether or not we can flag, like if they don't provide the actual plans as part of the application up front, can they just say lot 1 gets 900, lot 2 gets 1,100, lot 3 gets whatever, we just track it that way. My sense is we can, it's just I need to double check. But for the poll, and I see 2 hands, so why don't we go with Sarah and then Kathy?
Hi, Pauline. So I think I just heard you say that we were allowed to set a maximum, but we weren't required to set a maximum. Is that correct?
Right. The minimum compliance, or the OAR, says the city may limit the maximum, or the city may limit the minimum or maximum size of dwelling units in a cluster, but must apply the maximum building footprint of 900 square feet per dwelling unit.
Okay, so I guess my question is, would it be okay for us just to set the footprint as 900 but not have the 1,400? I guess I'm wondering why we would want to restrict, like if you have the 900 and you could do 2 stories and go to 1,800 and have more living space in that same footprint, why would we want to limit it?
I mean, that is definitely an option. You could get a fairly large structure because you could do a 900 square foot footprint plus a 200 square foot garage. So then you're at 1,100. So you could get a 2,200 square foot plus unit on these small lots. But if the group is supportive of that, that is something we, according to my read of the minimum compliance, is an option.
I just think if the footprint is the same, but you could have more living space, that I'm not sure what the benefit would be to limit that space.
Thank you, Sarah. Kathy?
Yeah, you're going to be surprised, but I'm going to say I think there is a reason, pretty much as been explained in terms of the cottages having sort of a more of a story and a half type of look as opposed to straight up 1,800. It seems like that would be too much in a cottage cluster for me, too much square footage, but that's just my opinion. I wanted to point out that if the idea of having 1,400 square feet as a average, then if the option is for every lot to be 1,400, that doesn't quite make sense to me. It seems like that's too large. And I would be open to another number there to me, but I don't have a specific number in mind. And, you know, I'm not wedded to the 1,400, but, you know, basically you'd have a 900 square foot first floor and a 500 square foot second floor. It's fine. But anyway, I don't see that we should go to 1,800, you know, have just the footprint and allow people to go straight up 2-story. I think that winds up being more like a townhouse development. So just my opinion.
The examples I showed 2 weeks ago, the newest one in Northwest Crossings, those were maxed out, I think, at around 1,100, 1,200 square feet. And our code today is at 1,200 for the maximum square footage, not 14.
1,200 makes sense to me. I've done a lot of 1,200 square foot homes. However, when they're 2-story, there's an extra 100 square feet in there for the stair on both floors, the way you count them. So I could see going to 1,300, but 1,400 seems too much.
Okay.
That is, if every single one is allowed to be that size.
Right. So your suggestion is if they're not going to average, then we don't want every single unit to be 1,400 square feet.
Exactly.
It might be 1,300 square feet.
Yeah, you're trying to get smaller units and larger units, and so if everything is the same, it should be a smaller number than the average, whatever you think that should be.
Good point. Mike?
I kind of agree with Kathy that we need to be careful that we're not always focusing how do we maximize the flow area in every building on every project that we're looking at. When I think of a cottage project, I think back about 19 years ago, I went to a cottage project built here in Bend, just open. It was an open house. Wonderful project. All the units were about 1,000 square feet. The open space was completely surrounded by these 8 or 9 different cottages. The garages were there was one car garage, a bank of them. It was, to me, the true meaning of you're creating a small community where you have some open space. You're not in the shadow of tall buildings tightly spaced. It's still there. It's off of Monterey Pines or Monterey Views. We will have another chance to look at this down the road on the second review, people should go look at that project and get an understanding of what I think a developer, he could have done more. He could have done bigger buildings. He could have done townhouses, but he just wanted to do a small community of small 1,000 square foot units.
And Mike, which one where's the location of that? Just give me an idea.
It's right below College Way as you're going.
Okay. The Muse there.
Monterey Pine. I think it's a street. They did a private street called Monterey Muse, MEWS. There's actually two different cottages. One uses 1,000 square foot. The other project went a little bit bigger units, close to 1,500. So you can look at the two and get a sense of, oh, those are bigger, those are smaller. It's you go one place, you can see both.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if those are approved under our cottage code, but they sure do reflect the intent of a cottage development.
Yeah, we're trying to maximize square footage in bedrooms, and then you're going to find the most cost effective is the triplex, as Bill was saying. You get rid of all, you attach the building, but that place has a completely different feel.
Yep, I agree. Audrey? Oops, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, it's Jesse. I don't have the ability to raise my hand. I just had a comment whenever you guys are ready.
Is that Jesse?
Yeah, it's Jesse. Can you hear me?
I can. Did you call in?
Yeah, I called in, so I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead, Jesse. I didn't realize you were here.
Yeah. Oh, I said here. Maybe you didn't hear me. Anyways, with the maximum square footage thing, we build really small spaces as well. But what I'm finding is you know, our product only works for like a single or a couple, or maybe a couple with a kid. And that's with our newer houses we're doing that are at 900 square feet of livable space. The only argument to like give a little bit more square footage for this is to have dense housing that's also good for someone who has a couple kids, you know, and at 1,800 square feet, you know, the average house size in America, I think it's over 2,000 square feet. So anything that's a little bit lower is still going to be a benefit. And then you're opening up to like another demographic aside from, you know, singles or couples. That would be my only argument for, you know, just throwing a couple. It's only another 200 square feet, I think, right? Anyways, that's my opinion on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Audrey and then Scott.
Three things. One, again, keep in mind when you're looking at the square feet from a perspective of how much house you can get out of it, that if they do have attached garages, it will be less than that in order to get a functional garage. Another thing is how I'm not sure how garages on the common lot work with these square feet requirements. I love the Monterey Mews, Monterey Pines whole development. I wanted to apply that to the James Drive one and ran up against issues with it because I love the way they do just the easy driveway with the roll up curb for parking off to the sides. It works really, really well. And for some reason, there were hangups on that when I tried to develop James Drive. So I'm afraid I don't have the specifics on that, but it's just something to look at of what's allowed, you know, for parking and access and all that stuff. And I'm not sure how they addressed ADA on that, or if they had to. I would assume they would have had to have done something, but that tends to throw a monkey wrench in things too.
Thank you, Audrey. Scott?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know. I feel kind of strange having the square feet maximum. I'm kind of trending towards not having that maximum square feet. And I think the idea of providing for a kind of different demographics, you know, maybe a larger family or a home office or something like that as people work from home more. And if these are getting built, I mean, right now, if they're getting built without maximizing, then, you know, it shows maybe that it's not always the incentive to build out a rectangular box. I do understand that there's a fear of these becoming kind of large buildings that might deviate from what we would think of as a cottage cluster. But yeah, I guess I'm kind of maybe a little bit leaning towards not having that square feet per dwelling unit, you know, or besides the footprint on these.
Audrey, and then I think we'll take a poll so we can keep going.
Yeah, no, that was a really good point. In fact, I like that idea because again, we're looking at development options, and although it was developed more to get those smaller structures, it's a great community feel, which I think we need a lot more of anywhere, anyway, regardless of the demographic that it's serving. So I think that's a great idea.
So I think our first poll is just going to be to raise your hand if you support no maximum square footage. So they will still be stuck with the 900 square foot footprint. So that's going to be their limiting factor.
Looks like we have 6 hands up for no maximum. Oh, wait, hang on. Oh no, here we go. Okay, 6.
Jesse can't raise his hand.
Okay.
Jesse, did you want to say whether or not you support no maximums or not? Okay, so let's say Jesse doesn't vote. So I see 1, 2.
Sorry, I support no maximums. I lost contact with you and had to call back in.
Okay. So support then is 1, 2, 3.
Should be 7.
7, and then not support is Oh, it keeps moving. Oh, are you?
Okay. How about, I think we're getting a mixing now. So if you support no maximums, please lower your hand. And those of you who support having the maximum, raise your hand. Okay, I think it's coming together. It looks like we have 2 supporting maximums. 3. 3 supporting maximums. 4.
4.
All right, final call, last chance. I think we'll stick with 4. 1 went down, but I think it's safe to keep that in. Thank you.
Okay, so what will be in the draft then is no maximums. And then obviously we still have the building footprint of 899 square feet. And the 200 square foot exemption, which lives down below, that can be used for a garage. So this is the building height requirement. And I think, I can't remember which one this came out of. It's the maximum building height for all structures is 25 feet or 2 stories, whichever's greater. Any comments on this? Scott, and then Kathy, and then Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about that 900 square feet. Is that, I mean, is there any leeway with the state on that? Because it just seems
No.
strange.
Yeah.
No, that is right out of the House bill.
And we tried, Scott, in the rulemaking.
Okay.
So.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. 29 feet, 11 7/8 on one side, and yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I thought we at least had 900. You only have 899.
0.9. You can go just
Yeah,
not 900.
That's right.
No, and yeah, I understand the disappointment there, but that's part of the reason why that exemption for the attached garage exists, because without that, I mean, you're looking at 700 square foot footprint, which seems pretty difficult to actually get something built that small and sell it.
And then Kathy, and then Bill.
Yeah, so I'm switching over to the building height issue.
Yep.
And I would recommend that we just leave it at 2 stories and not call out a specific number. I know we're not really done with our discussion about height and how we measure it, but let me explain to the group that if you want to have a very steep pitch roof, it's a certain look, a traditional look. The ridge might slightly exceed 25 feet, depending on how the building is organized. If the goal is really just to say two stories, it's not going to get ridiculously high. So I think it would be sufficient just to say it's limited to 2 stories and not call out a specific number.
Well, it does say whichever's greater. So I think we need some number in case it's a single story. So it says the maximum height for all structures is 25 feet or 2 stories, whichever's greater. So if your 2 stories is greater than 25 feet, that's okay.
Okay. All right, I misread it then, I apologize.
No need to apologize, Kathy. Bill?
So this is one of those consistency issues. I mean, I don't know why we just wouldn't use what's in the code now, which is 30 feet in RS, and I think it's 35 in RM. I mean, why pick a different number and this optional thing and stuff for this one particular type of house? If the 30-foot limit, isn't working and there's something wrong with the way it's calculated or something, I would say fix that, but fix it across everything. One of the big issues I think we should be trying to aim for here is some compatibility within neighborhoods. And height is one of the things that helps gain some compatibility. But I think the same formula ought to be used for all types of housing. There shouldn't be different approaches for each different type of housing.
And I think the intent on the height limits for cottages goes back to Kathy's point of the type of community that you're building. They're not supposed to be large structures on these little lots because we don't even have minimum lot sizes. I think it's just the attempt to keep it more as a cottage development. But if the group is interested in consistency versus a restricted height, that's something we can discuss.
I mean, I agree with that notion of it being a community that has a little bit different look. That's why I voted to have I mean, once Ethan explained where they got the 1,400 square feet from, I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds like a reasonable explanation. But you know, if you can do 2 stories at any height, then, you know, you theoretically could end up with structures that look pretty different than everything around them. So I don't know. I'm just a fan of sort of consistency here. I don't think we should be, you know, sort of advantaging or disadvantaging one format over another.
And Bill, I mean, you're correct in that because in our cottage, I was just looking at our Excel chart, our cottage development in the Bend Development Code today uses the 30 feet for RS and RM, and then we have that 1998 thing in there, which I'll take out, but 35 feet for RM. So the cottage development in the Bend Code today will match what we allow for duplexes, triplexes, houses. So we can make this one match if there's support for that, or it can be the more restrictive of 25 feet. Just, it's completely up to this group.
Well, that would be my suggestion, would be to stay with what we've got.
Good suggestion. Thanks, Bill. Mike, and then Scott. Mike, you're muted.
Well,
There
yeah, I was looking at the code as you were looking at the code, and I was thinking, the other code for cottages, the cottage housing 30, was to prevent them from doing the 3 stories. And I picture that project under construction behind my commercial project, and I'm just would be shocked to see, wow, that would give that such a different feel if they had elected to go 3 stories. They didn't. I think they're all one with a part of a second story, but they could have. Just something to think about.
Scott?
Yeah, I agree with Bill on this one. Making it more consistent and not have different requirements for each, you know, different types of development. I think it's good. And I also agree with Kathy, of course, about how, you know, the way that we measure the height based on the ridge kind of kills the 612 pitches or houses that might be a little bit wider. I mean, it's a little restrictive. But I do, if that gets changed down the road, then it's easier if that change happens and it kind of meshes well with all the different areas or all the different development types. And I'm not a big fan of doing kind of more aesthetic design intent with some of these areas. Like I understand it's nice to have certain areas that have a different feel or look to them, but I think when we try and regulate that by baking it into the development code, it starts to get a little bit based on kind of someone's more design opinion and not necessarily I just think it's based on more design opinion, and that's maybe not the best way of doing it.
Okay, so I think I heard, unless I see another hand come up, pretty much support. We haven't heard from Lisa. Did you have any input, or Karna? It's been kind of quiet.
Hey, this is Lisa. I don't have any additional input. I'm just following along.
I don't really, I rely on the people that are going to build these things. So.
Okay. So then I am hearing just use the height for consistency that we allow for the cottages that are in our code today and other missing middle type housing.
This is
all right,
Jesse. I agree with that.
Okay, good, Jesse. Now we are on to parking. So these are the two options. The first one is from the model code, and the second one in bold is from the OAR's minimum compliance. So the model code would be 1 off-street parking space per cottage cluster project is 0 spaces per unit with floor area less than 1,000 square feet. And then if they were more than 1,000 square feet, then you get 1 space per unit. And then the OARs is you may not require more than 1 off-street parking space per dwelling unit in a cottage cluster. So it'd be 1 per unit. So we have 2 options. So I'm hoping to see some hands so we can pick an option. Ethan.
So I just wanted to kind of call out here, this will depend, I think, on how the city anticipates defining a kind of floor area, especially if the city decides to go, or this group decides to go with the A as it's listed here and not the bolded option, because there is that 900 or that 200 square foot exemption from the building footprint. So just matching up definitions. That was my only comment when you sent this over, Pauline.
Oh, so are you saying then if the floor area, they do a 900 square foot unit, but add a 200 square foot garage, that bumps them over 1,000.
Right, but they'll have a garage, so I guess that's kind of already meeting the requirement anyway. But yeah, just kind of making sure that the city links up how they're defining building footprint and if that differs from floor area and if a garage is included in floor area.
Okay, and I think it does for our sake. Another issue I see with this one is if, well, wait, we put no maximum, so we're not going to, okay. I was going to say if we had a maximum or we were doing the averages on the size of the units, we wouldn't always know the size. So then the 1,000 would be hard to track. But if they don't submit, sorry, I'm thinking out loud, but if we don't know what the units are going on at the time of development, we're not going to know if they have a floor area of 1,000 or not. That one seems a little tricky to me. Mike?
Thank you. I think you all should remember that one duplex I pointed out on 9th Street. And I tried to show that it had 8 bedrooms and there were 7 cars being parked for just that one duplex. Just for out of curiosity, a lot of those lots in that part of Bend are 6,000 square foot lots. I took that duplex, cut it down the middle, and created a bunch of buildings that fit the criteria that we've just all agreed to so far today. I could put 4 of those on one of those existing 6,000 square foot lots, and there's going to be as many as 9 cars looking for a place to park if it's all rented out to young adults who, yes, most young adults do have a car. I'm just pointing out that there are going to be consequences. There are going to be consequences where they're going to start parking well beyond their house and start to fill up some of our small streets, our narrow streets. And it's not just an exception. There's actually another one just like it built on the same block. The same developer built 2 of these. So we just need to bear in mind what the consequences could be by not considering that people still have cars.
And so the maximum, Mike, if you went with OAR, is 1 space per unit.
Yeah. And so if you have, let's say, you have 16 bedrooms, and so then you're only providing 4 parking spaces, you have 12 cars that are 12 people, because these are the types of units that young adults, families aren't usually renting these. They're young adults who get together because that's the only thing they can afford. They can't go afford the one bedroom in the Nest or the Hickson or the future Evergreen. They have to find housing that they can share. So that's why you see 7 cars out there next to that duplex. So I'm just telling you, it's possible using all the siding standards we've all just went through. You could have 16 bedrooms there and trying to figure out, well, if they all have cars, where do they park? And if you have 2 of those types of lots on a block, your whole block is just now covered by people trying to find a place to park. And it happens in other communities. We are a little bit behind in infill in these upzoning type practices, and there's articles out there by people who have said their parking now is they park several blocks away from their home.
Thank you, Mike. Dave?
I don't know how we can talk about parking without also considering public transportation. Those are just so commingled that it seems ridiculous to be even talking about building codes when we haven't made any kind of a requirement for people doing other things than driving their cars. I seriously doubt that 20% of the homes in Bend right now have public transportation within a quarter of a mile of them.
So we have 2 options, Dave, that we can pick from. I know that there's the 3rd option of the alternative siting and design process. I don't think there's support from this group to go through that process. And in honesty, I don't think there's support to go through that process from our city council either. So our options today, and yes, we don't know everything about transit, a little behind on that, but it's either option A from the model code or the other option, which is 1 space per dwelling unit per cottage.
It's the devil's choice, but I would go with the 1 person per dwelling.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Ethan?
Oh, sorry. I think my hand is probably still up from a while ago.
Okay.
Yep.
Audrey and then Sarah.
Just wanted to toss there again on garages. Is there any way to have, I know this is not in line with keeping things standard, but for cottages or just for garages in general, to allow a parking space of 19 feet by 9 instead of the 20 feet, so that you can have a 20-foot garage and a wall and door on either side and still have it fit?
We can, let me make a note on that, because our staff has talked about looking at the parking dimensions. Ours are a little bit outdated, so that might be coming. Maybe I'm not saying it definitely is or anything like that. It's just something that we have talked about.
That would make a huge difference, especially in these kind of developments where that garage size is so limited.
So next is Sarah, and then we have a long series of folks after this. So I'm just going to ask for folks to keep it concise if possible.
Pauline, my question is just again about the on-street parking credits. Is there any way to not allow the on-street parking credits in a way where they can overlap each other, like we've previously discussed? As someone else mentioned, we have really narrow streets, and I just see that as being a huge problem.
The OARs allow you to have credits for on-street parking. The city has always done up to 50% for residential and on-street parking. If the group does not want that, then we'd have to vote, because right now, the way it stands, all developments that are residential can propose a credit of 50%.
Okay. I definitely have a concern with the parking credits.
Thank you, Sarah. I don't know who is next.
Mike, then Kathy, then Bill, then Lisa. So Mike.
Yeah,
thank you, Lynn.
I wanted to point Audrey to go look at the Habitat for Humanity project under construction. I was there the other day. I paced out the garage because they looked short. And the length of the garage from the front to the framed wall was only 17 feet. And so I'm puzzled why you were asking about the 20 feet. I'm concerned on that project that if you've got a pickup, you're not going to be able to park in your garage. That's the only spot you're allocated in that whole project. So anybody who lives in that project, I don't know where they're going to park their truck. But so I guess make a long story short, yes, somebody's allowing the shorter garages already in this town.
Kathy?
I would support doing the OAR requirement. And I just wanted to give a little background information on what Audrey was asking for. I do quite a bit of work in the city of Santa Rosa in California. And about 10 years ago, they went to a parking space being 19 feet to do exactly what she was concerned about, to fit into a garage that's 20 feet deep, and it's worked out just fine. And you're also allowed to have your sidewalk be 19 feet from the face of the garage door. So there's just an assumption that the parking space can be 19 feet. And I believe you've already made the change here about going from 24 feet to 22 feet for parallel parking, and 22 feet works really well. I know there's concerns about having clearances at driveways and so forth. And I believe that a 22-foot space works as long as it clears the ramp into the driveway. So just wanted to give you that background information. I've been doing it for probably 20 years, but definitely 10 years of doing the 19 feet, and it's been working fine.
Thank you, Kathy. Bill?
Yeah, I favor requiring one space per unit. I mean, we're talking about the potential for having, numerous households on a single lot, and somehow it has to be accommodated. My point has always been that vehicles are personal property, and storing personal property has always been a private responsibility. And if we shift that to a public obligation, that's a pretty big deal, and we need to think about it very carefully. As long as somebody brought up the issue about the size of garages and parking spaces, in our neighborhood, the big problem is pickup trucks. They don't fit in a standard garage, and they don't fit between the sidewalk and the garage. They overlap onto the sidewalk. And so, they tend to end up in the street. And I mean, if we're talking about keeping up with reality, Ford Motor Company is discontinuing the production of all sedans. They're only going to produce pickups and SUVs and minivans going forward. So we already have garages and front yard parking spaces that don't accommodate, a third or so of the vehicles that people drive. So it's good to hear that the city is looking at that, but I'm not in favor of making them smaller. The more people are driving bigger vehicles, not smaller vehicles.
Lisa? Oh.
Hi,
yeah.
Yeah, hi, this is Lisa. I am also in favor of the one parking space per unit, but my question really has to do with, are we able to do any kind of credits for proximity to transit stops?
To further reduce the parking?
Yeah. Yeah, so in other words, if a cottage cluster is close to a transit stop, then I'm wondering if that might be an opportunity for us to maybe meet in the middle here. We keep dancing around this idea of not having enough transit, but maybe some of these units could be built closer to transit stops and we wouldn't need as much parking.
Yeah, we can always say 0.5 per unit if they're near transit. We've done that in other sections of the code.
This is Jesse. Can I put my hand up?
Yep, you can. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, because we were just dealing with the micro apartments, and we got some off street. I thought we got off street credit because we were near transit, and those are going to be 400 square feet interior space, and we're doing 0.5 there. We're assuming that there's going to be people that want to live in spaces that are small that don't have a car. If we're just assuming that 100% of people have a car, then yeah, I mean, we're going to have to do something different down in the future for parking anyways. But if these, if the spirit of this bill is to try to give people middle income housing, you have to assume that there's some people that, especially if they're near transit, can get on without having a car. So I like the 0.5 and always have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Mike?
Yeah, just because the transit may be within 600 feet or whatever the criteria is, doesn't mean that person's going to necessarily not own a car. We looked into the American Community Survey, and car ownership is holding pretty steady in Bend. It's about, I think there's households without cars runs about 5%. Car ownership across the board, though, per household is increasing. So it's hard to imagine if we just started saying projects only have to provide half a space per car. There's still a lot of car ownership just because they occasionally ride a bike or walk or catch that bus. They still own a car.
Thank you, Mike. So I think that is all the hands raised. From the comments that I heard, the majority of the support was the one off-street parking space per unit, which, thank you, that is way easier to calculate up front and not base it on square footage in case we don't know the square footages in the beginning. I think I would like to see the hands raised if you are in support of allowing on-street parking credits up to 50%. So this is if you're in support.
This is Jesse. I'm in support.
Okay. So that gives us
Excuse me,
5
within 50
people.
feet of what?
What was that? I'm sorry, Dave.
Within 50 feet of what?
50%. So the code today allows a residential use to count up to 50% of their required parking on street, and it has to be in front of your project site, so abutting your project.
Thanks.
So that brings us to 5, including Jesse.
And that's 1, 2. Okay, so I think the on-street parking credit will go away. And then the one space per unit has to be provided on site.
Kathy and Scott. Oh, Kathy's hand is down. Scott, did you want to say anything or just continuing to lower?
Nope. Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
really wanting the on-street credit.
Yeah, me too. That's all. I wasn't clear that we were even limiting it to 50%. It just, I thought we were having it be a credit. Oh, well, I don't think,
that's
I
a
don't
common
think this,
thing with all developments, I feel.
yeah,
Well,
I don't think this is,
and the majority was
I
supportive.
understand.
So we're going to
I
move on to
understand.
that. Lisa?
Hi, I know we've kind of changed the topic, but just in terms of these construction workers' trucks, I just verified with a couple of people the length of their trucks, and their length is 21 feet and a quarter inches. So as we're talking about garages and so forth, but I guess most of these construction trucks are not going to fit in the garages. And so then we'll have to look at where are those trucks going to be? Are they going to be in the driveway, or are we pushing those trucks also out onto the streets?
Thank you, Lisa. All right, so I think we will go to design standards, and we have a half hour. Let's see, so it says cottage clusters must meet the design standards, no other standards apply. So, and hopefully Ethan's still on here. Okay, so this is the cottage orientation standard. Basically says cottages must be clustered around a common courtyard, and we'll go into details about common courtyard a little bit further down. So you have each cottage within a cluster must either abut the common courtyard or must be directly connected to it by a path. That's pretty flexible. So abut means they touch the courtyard, and if they don't actually touch the courtyard, there just needs to be a path to the courtyard that they are clustering around. And then it says a minimum of 50% of the cottages within the cluster must orient to the common courtyard and have an entrance facing the common courtyard, be within 10 feet of the common courtyard, and be connected to the common courtyard by a path. Any comments on this, Bill?
Yeah, I had jotted some notes here about it. It seems to me it's that this statement about abutting a common courtyard is a bit in conflict with the way the language flows throughout the rest of this section, where it keeps repeating being connected by a pedestrian path. And it seems to me that that's clearer, because theoretically you could abut a courtyard but be fenced in, be fenced off from that courtyard. And I don't think that's the intention. You know, every place else, if you look throughout here, every place else that refers to, it must have a pedestrian path connecting it.
So the way I read this, and Ethan can help too, is that it looks like you have an option. You either abut the common courtyard. If you don't abut it, then you have to have a path. And then 50% of the cottage clusters must at least orient to the common courtyard and have their entrances facing towards it.
It just seems to me that if you took out the phrase about abutting the common courtyard, you accomplish the same thing.
So in a sense, I think they could put the courtyard somewhere else, maybe on the other side of the parking lot, and then as long as you have a path.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It just seemed to me that it added a possible element of confusion, that you could have units that abut the courtyard but aren't actually oriented to it or connected to it. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I'm just not sure what is gained by having those words. That's what it comes down to. What does abut the common courtyard achieve that isn't already achieved by being connected by a path? And I would keep B. I mean, yeah, half of them have to be oriented toward the courtyard. Maybe I'm the only one who has that issue. I don't know, but
I'll look into it.
Yeah, it just seemed to me that as you go further down, there are more references that say you have to be connected by a pedestrian path, and I think that accomplishes like 100% of the issue.
Next is Audrey, then Kathy, then Mike.
I was just curious to how we're defining entrance. Can we have the door sideways and a covered porch, that where the pathway comes towards the courtyard? Is that acceptable still?
So you're saying the entrance would be on this, where would the entrance be?
Like if it could be on the side, but the covered entry is still on the front facing facade, whether it's stepped back a little bit or at the very front, but it allows that versatility of a side facing door.
I'm going to say a main entrance is the entrance to the dwelling unit, and it would be facing the courtyard.
So the door would have to face the courtyard.
only 50%.
Right, but I just wanted to clarify the definition of entrance unless it's defined somewhere. Because if you're meaning the door must face it, then we should probably say door. And I do like, just like any other time, I like the idea of the, as long as let's say you have a nice front covered porch. I would love the option of having the door sideways so that you can enter into a mudroom and then have the windows of a living area looking over the porch, looking into the common area.
Might need to see a sketch on what you're describing, because to me, if the porch is on the side, then the side is actually facing the courtyard.
No, the porch would still be in the front. And that is what I'm considering the entrance. But the door could be to the side of the porch. So then you get the full use of the porch for sitting and relating to the common area.
Don't we have that in the, I should know this, but in our code, the development code today, I think we provide those 3 options. Let me I'll look into that. I think we have the 3 options.
As long as those options tie to what you're calling main entrance. That's what I just wanted to make sure that that definition was clear.
I'm following now. Who's next? Maybe Kathy?
Kathy, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with Audrey. I've done many a front porch that has a door off to the side. It really has a lot to do with what the size and shape of the lot is, and it makes it's still a very nice entryway, but it's perpendicular to the.
Was it listed at Tiff?
What was that?
Ah.
Somebody's talking. Anyway, yeah, so I would agree with Audrey on that. And I'm curious about the be within 10 feet from the common courtyard measured from the facade, that number 2, where that came from and why that's important. If you could elaborate on that a little bit. I'm not sure. I agree with it, a specific number like 10 feet.
I think the intent is to make sure that they're somewhat near the common courtyard, and it came from the model code. And if Ethan has any additional is he still here? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have anything to add to that?
Is this about the abutting, or is this about the
10
feet?
feet.
Okay. Yeah, so really when you think about a cottage cluster, and we wanted to make sure that common courtyard is a primary feature of that cottage courtyard, as opposed to an open space kind of tucked away, so that there's at least a majority or some semblance of a majority that is oriented to and really responding to that common courtyard, more so than avoiding it. I guess that's a better way to put it. Really just kind of highlighting the importance of that common courtyard in that development, putting them very close, putting them orienting the majority of them to that courtyard, having them connected.
I think too, it helps define a cluster. I mean, yes, it's 50% that need to be around the courtyard, and that's your cluster.
I guess the question would be, if the common courtyard includes the pathway, say a sidewalk, and then you have, say, 5 feet of planting and then a 6-foot porch, you're over the 10 feet to your door. So it just seems like it's a kind of a rigid number. I don't know. I don't know what to suggest. It just seems to be a restrictive number.
So we could define, I don't know that the code actually defines facade. So we could say to the porch or the wall of the dwelling unit.
Yeah, that would make more sense to me, because it gives you, like, you might want to have a very deep front porch because it's your extra living area. Say it's an 8-foot deep porch, then you're getting kind of limited with this 10-foot number.
Yeah. So. Okay, good point. Mike?
You can probably anticipate my question. I like the project, the old one, where they were clustered around the open space. I looked at all the ones you suggested, Pauline, to look at, and by far, nearly all of them, the courtyard was sort of off to the side on the perimeter, and they sort of qualified by sticking two buildings sort of perpendicular to it kind of met the intent, but it certainly didn't give you the feel that it's a courtyard. It's almost just like a little open space off to the very edge of the project. It's frustrating that we can't have more projects. Well, the Habitat for Humanity, all their units are around the courtyard and not just primarily on one side, one long leg and then one short leg. I don't know if anybody cares about that, but I'm just saying it's disappointing.
So did you go by the two in Northwest Crossings? One is right by my house. All the units, every single one of them, except two out of 12 front onto the courtyard. And then the one that's in the what I call the hole by Lemhi Pass and Shevlin, all of them front the courtyard except one that sits up high and 3 due to topography actually front the public street.
I have on my screen right now the one there on High Lake Sloop. It just doesn't feel like a courtyard project when you, and I've actually physically been on that one. It just is, it's not a courtyard. It's a little open space off to the side. That's just how it comes across when you're standing there. But again, you have rules. You have this 50%. There's ways around it so that the developer can have one long side, a real long skinny courtyard, then two buildings on the short leg, and they meet the letter of what you've written as a code. It's just disappointing.
And you saw the barn that they built in that courtyard for everyone to use and the community garden?
Yeah, I saw that.
Huh. Yeah, I honestly, I probably disagree with that. I've seen so many people out using their courtyard, and with all the units, that does comply with the intent with this being surrounded by the courtyard being 100% surrounded by the units.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Next?
Jesse's here.
Oh, Jesse?
Well, just the 50% thing, just in designing, like all of our, in the hiatus, one of our big clusters, which had 8 houses, they all their porches all faced each other. And one of the things, if I could go back and redesign that, I would use more of that 50%, because you create this fishbowl thing that's really is difficult for privacy, to give degrees of privacy to the residents. So I think that it's nice to have that 50%, and I get, what Bill's saying, but to me, it's good to have a courtyard that some of the houses face, but they don't necessarily have to face each other's doorways or porch doorways, so you're looking directly into the other person's thing. And if you have 50% that you can kind of put off to the side to control the privacy for the people in the cottage cluster, I think I would have used more of that if I went back to design it. And requiring 100% of them to face a courtyard is really difficult too when you start to look at the lot that you're about to design. It's useful to be able to have some that don't have to face the courtyard, so you can use up all the square footage for building actual lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Bill.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to this issue that Audrey had raised about the main entrance. I was wondering if there is a definition in the code for main entrance, and if not, maybe there could be, and that it would differentiate between the sort of entrance to the property and the front door. And I keep hearing you use them interchangeably. And I think maybe, the architects and other folks here are differentiating between those. I like the idea that there should be some variety, that not every door faces the street. It provides some variety on the streetscape, and it provides some variety for the floor plan of homes. And so I think, if we can differentiate between a main entrance, how you're approaching the house, that where you're going and so forth, and the front door. I don't think the front door has to be construed as, facing the street all the time. But related to that, I wanted to come back to something that Scott had mentioned the last time, which I thought was a great idea. The idea of pulling these design standards as they relate to front doors and so forth into one section and have them apply to all of these different types. You know, again, we could end up with quite a you know, quite a mess here of different rules for each of these, you know, for duplexes versus cottages versus townhomes. And I don't see really a rationale for that. I think it makes more sense to have one section. If that needs to be amended, it can be easily amended. And everything else refers to those standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Can I just comment? It's Jesse again.
Oh, hi, Jesse.
Sorry, just on the front, I think it's really important because the distinction between the cottage cluster, front door, back door, what door is the entrance door, compared to trying to lump that into other building types doesn't really work, because what you're trying to do, and the advantage of this is in the cottage clusters, you can face your main entrance in quotes that isn't facing the street. It's faced into the common area. So you get this kind of thing where you come home, you park, you go through a door, whether you define that as the front door or the back door or whatever, and then you walk out on your porch, and then you're isolated from the street. That's the whole, you know, that's part of the theory behind the cottage cluster. So I think you do have to be really careful if you try to get into this defining of where the main entrance is and how it has to face the street and all the stuff that we were talking about with the duplexes and triplexes. I do think the cottages require to have their own separate defining of what, you know, the front door is and the back door. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Okay, so the main change I heard on here is basically not using facade in number 2 and using, I'll clean this up, look at porches and walls, so it gives you a little bit more flexibility. And then this main entrance, we do use in other sections of the code, the 3 options that you can have, like a side loaded porch or a porch that's covered with a pathway. So I can build that into here to provide the flexibility. And again, this is only applying to 50% of the units around a courtyard. I don't know, we talked about this section here is cottages. Let me scoot over. Cottages must be within 20 feet of a street property line and have their entrances facing the street. So this is saying that they're not actually around the courtyard. So that one into Northwest Crossings I was just talking about, due to topography, there's no way that they could actually front the courtyard. So they fronted the public street. I'd say their doors well within 20 feet of the public street. And then the letter D is cottages not facing the common courtyard or the street must have their main entrances facing a pedestrian path. I would say this is repetitive. Like Bill said, this seems to be in there a couple times. Any comments on these? And I can add the same flexibility when we talk about entrances here that I will add up above, so you have a clear idea of what we're talking about. It's not so much the door, it's just the entrance. Scott?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify something about some of the comments I made last week, and some of it might even be just more of definition. So for what you're doing right here with looking at, you know, the replacing the word facade with something like porch or a wall or you know, a structural member, covered something, or right here where down below where it says entrances. If I understand the cottage cluster is different than like a townhome, and so the entrance would be different, language would be different, but I think if there's somewhere, I guess, in the development code that some of these can reference in terms of, you know, basically saying entrance, you know, what is an entrance? Is it a covered porch? Is it a certain size covered porch? Does it have to be elevated, or what materials, or something like that? If you could think of those as like moves or in the architecture world, patterns, that if those are defined somewhere else, it would kind of help. And that's kind of a larger ask, more than what we're talking about here. But yeah, I just wanted to, it came up, so I just kind of wanted to address it a little bit. But yeah, it'd be nice if some of the development code gets really complicated sometimes with a lot of semantic explanations that are similar, but in many different areas of the development code.
Thank you, Scott. All right, looks like I want to see if we can get through just a little bit more here. Now we're talking about the courtyard design standards. This is saying how many cottages cluster around a courtyard. We already talked about a minimum of 3 being in a cottage cluster. The one of the codes, I think it's the model code, says 8. Here's a maximum. We don't have to use 8. We do 12 in the Bend Development Code. Kathy?
Yeah, it should be more than 8, at least 12. I mean, why limit this? So I would go with what you have as 12, or it could potentially be more depending on how it's laid out. But I would definitely say 12 at a minimum.
Okay. Or 12 would be the maximum. 3 is the minimum.
I'm sorry, I would be even more, I guess is what I was saying. So 12, at least 12. So
we have Ethan, then Moe.
Yeah, if I could speak to this, and this actually comes from the minimum compliance standards in Division 46. Yeah. This question is something that I think trips up a lot of folks, especially, I just right now I had to go back and read it. Really what we're talking about here is what is the minimum amount of cottages that a city can require a second common courtyard through. So the conversation is really related to unreasonable cost and delay. We didn't want to set up a scenario where the city says you must have a minimum of 3 cottages in a cottage cluster, but at your 5th cottage, you have to have a second common courtyard to accommodate that. So this is really saying before that second common courtyard can be required, what is that number that kind of trips that threshold? The city doesn't have to put a maximum number of cottage clusters on a common courtyard, but it can't be less than 8. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Ethan. So it cannot be less if we were to do a maximum.
Correct.
Okay, so we could just say minimum 3 and then leave it open. Like the whole development could be around it and only 50% actually have to face it.
Correct. Yeah, but if a city is interested in saying, look, you're at some point you have to have a second common courtyard, what is that number? It just can't be less than 8.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. That's actually what I was gonna ask about, because I think I could see 8 cottages around a common courtyard, and then the next 8 around another, and then the next 8 around another, and I think going up to 12 would be fine. I don't know if I would agree with not having a limit on how many per courtyard though, because then that feels like, I doubt this would ever happen, but if there was like 100 and 1 courtyard and half of them are ringed around the outside, that doesn't seem to really fit the intent as much.
And the Bend Development Code does 12. Let's do Kathy, Scott, and then Bill.
Yeah, that was helpful to understand where this was coming from. And Pauline, the cottages that I did up there in Sisters, there's 9 of them and they ring 3 sides of the common area. So if there were completely ringing the courtyard, there would have been 9. So it would have exceeded 8. And so that's why I didn't want you to limit it to 8. I understand what Moe is saying, but I think 8's too small. I would say 12, 14, something like that.
I bumped it up to 12.
Yeah. And that's
examples
fine.
we looked at last week or 2 weeks ago, some of them maxed out at the 12.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's fine. 8's too small a number, or just not have a maximum and just, you know, I know people are afraid that developers aren't going to use common sense. So I understand wanting to put some number there, but either 12 or nothing, in my opinion.
Thank you, Kathy. Scott?
Yeah, I was just wondering about when it says you have to have another courtyard. I mean, could the courtyards be combined? You know, I'm imagining, I've lived in up in Bellingham, they had an area where it was like a kind of a linear park that was lined by houses. And I was just wondering if this could be used to develop something like that, where it would be the common courtyards would essentially be combined, and it would be kind of a linear strip, and you could have up to, you know, 20 or so houses, you know, almost like a block or two.
I mean, possibly it says that the common courtyard cottages must abut the common courtyard on at least 2 sides of the courtyard. So it's not going to be lineal with cottages just on one side. So that's in little C.
Well, there's, I mean, imagine like a strip, a cottage, a courtyard strip with houses on both sides.
Oh, right.
And then you just do the exact same thing next to it a couple more times or whatnot. I mean, wouldn't that be, I guess, is that available with this code as written? And it would, I guess they would be separated. So I'm kind of wondering about this the maximum of the common courtyard, or the maximum cottage around a common courtyard, and how you would define that.
So I think it just gets back to, I believe it's Richard Ross that kind of created this concept, and the idea is to create little communities within the entire cottage development. And so clustering creates little pocket, you know, neighborhoods versus just one big one. So that, I think, is, you know, the idea behind creating successful cottage developments versus just large lineal spaces with not clustering.
Yeah, but I'm saying that right now there's no I guess separation requirement between the courtyards. So you could make a courtyard that's somewhat linear and just build and just do this next to it. Like, am I making sense?
Yeah, no, I think
okay,
that might be possible. Bill, Audrey, and then Karna.
Yeah, I agree with Moe. I think there should be some kind of upper limit. I live on a long block with 49 houses. And if you basically took the street out and put grass in there, which is sort of what Scott's describing, you'd have a really long linear kind of park that the homes would be oriented to. And I could picture that, but I don't know, it strikes me more like a golf course development or something, and not this idea of a cottage cluster. You know, in reality, of the 59 homes, it's like, you know, you only know so many of your neighbors. And I think the idea here is to have a bit of familiarity and intimacy and a sense of community. And if you get to 30 or 50 or 100 homes, you don't have that anymore. So I understand what Scott's saying, that the way it's written right now, there's nothing to prevent someone from putting 2 3-sided clusters together, and then you'd have, you know, 24 homes around a common area. But I don't think we should be encouraging, you know, sort of large developments without requiring that they have a second or third or fourth courtyard. That's just my opinion. So yeah, I agree. I agree with the 12 that we have already.
I wasn't arguing for doing that. I was just kind of looking at the code as written and saying, what's to prevent kind of someone from doing that? So.
Thank you, Scott, and Bill. Audrey, and then Karna, and then we have only 2 minutes left.
Oh, sorry, yeah, really quick, for the contiguous cottage clusters where that open court, your common courtyard might abut, maybe there's just a small landscaping requirement or something, or just any kind of architectural feature that defines a transition. It can be pretty open. It doesn't take much to make it feel like a separate courtyard, you know, to make Ross Chapin's idea of what they were finding with the upper limits, how they were creating more community by keeping that smaller. But it doesn't.
And thank you for the right name on that. I knew I was wrong. And
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we can put something in there to, I mean, if it's just orienting the cottages just a little bit angled at the each end, so it's clear it's clustered. There's some flexibility there.
Yeah, I would keep away from the restrictions on the building because they're really hard to do that without losing a lot of space. But we can maybe have that as an option between doing that and adding either a landscaping or architectural feature, because it can be just something that, you know, a little bit of landscaping that encroaches on the pathway, and then, you know, even a trellis or something, and you'll get the same function.
Yeah, I think you could split it up with a pathway. Karna?
Yeah, I want to chime in on this because I think you could have a very nice, you know, 3-mile running track that kind of connects all the separate sort of clusters, and maybe, you know, it's only a trail between each separate cluster, but you want to be able to be flexible and have, you know, the ability to have 49 or 100 all sort of connected, because then you have this really nice walking trail or running trail that can kind of come in and out of all of them. I don't want to preclude contiguous courtyards.
I think they could be contiguous by, you know, pathways. So you definitely have that connectivity.
Right.
I agree. I think what the group is just suggesting is that we just don't have one big courtyard.
I mean, you would have block standards though. The limitations for, I mean, you'd have to have roads that go through. You have like a.
You can use a pathway to meet that standard too.
Yeah, I mean, roads are good too, just because you don't want people having to drive 2 miles out of the way to go 2 blocks.
Pauline, Bill posted a question in the chat that I think might be worth confirming. The question is, can the common courtyard be in the setbacks? In other words, can it go all the way to a side property line and the square footage in the setback be counted as the courtyard? And I'm assuming the answer to that is no, but I wanted to make sure that we were putting it out there.
Sorry, I'm scrolling. I'm going back up to our setbacks. I don't think so, because I think there's a minimum dimension of 15 feet. Let me go down.
But can that 15 feet overlap the setback? It's just unclear.
All right, I think it might be in here somewhere, but we'll make it clear that the setbacks don't count.
So the setback is in addition to the 15 feet.
Well, I mean, the one that Mike and I disagree on, its courtyard is basically not back a sidewalk. There's a nice split rail fence and then landscaping and then their courtyard. And that I would say is probably within the 10-foot front yard setback, but it's still the courtyard. And it has a minimum dimension of 15 feet wide.
I mean, I don't know that I have an opinion. On smaller lots, I think it might be really hard if you couldn't count that 5-foot side setback. But it seems like it should be clear. And in reading this, I was not clear.
Okay, I'll look into that. I assume everybody probably has to go, or if not, we can keep going and just finish this. Can you all stay? That would be really exciting.
Yeah.
I have a meeting at 3:30, but this is Kathy. But
I bet we can finish by 3:30.
Okay.
This is Dave. I need to go.
I can stay till 3:30.
If folks don't mind, I wouldn't mind just finishing this, this is just our first draft. And then our next meeting will be the cleanups that we've been talking about. I'm losing a lot of people, huh? Let's see.
I can stay until I get a phone call that I'm waiting for.
There's still 9 on here, I think. You see Audrey, Bill.
Pauline, how about if we tackle it and then bring back what this smaller group is thinking to start the meeting next time? Would that work? Just so the bigger group has a sense has the ability to give some feedback on what the smaller group is able to come up with today.
Sure, we can do that.
Hopefully that's kind of a good compromise so we can keep moving and and that we're not cutting anybody out of the discussion.
Yeah, because I want to, we need to, this is the last section.
Are there any controversial things coming up? Are we going to talk about parking anymore?
There is.
I'm going to talk about parking oriented to a street. So just want to get to that.
Parking design. So I know this is probably one of the more important ones. So cluster parking, off-street parking may be arranged in clusters. Parking location and access. So this is basically mirroring what we have in the code today. And then the location and access. Parking must not be located in the perimeter setbacks and must be screened from public streets and adjacent residential uses via landscape buffer containing landscaping and/or architectural screening. I think what Kathy, you're hoping is that we can clarify that if they abut a street, they can actually put their driveway there.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah.
Right. And we had talked about that. And that is what the Northwest Crossings ones are still alley loaded, but there's good reason, I think, to add that. And I would probably add it to the existing cottage code that we have today.
And when we get off of this, I can do a screen capture from that shows what I did and why I'm saying that. It's important for people who can't visualize. I'm happy to provide that. I just don't have it right at the moment.
Do you have it right now?
Well, I have it on my screen. I don't know if I have how to do a screen share.
Do you want to email it to me?
Well, it's a link. It's the map that the Deschutes County Property Information Map, and I don't have a screen capture on this tablet that I'm on. I only have it at my desktop, so I have to go upstairs and do it and send it to you. If you want, I can do that and just be off the call for a minute.
No, that's okay. We can, let me, hold on real fast.
So it's Clear Pine is the street on one side and Wildflower Lane is the alley in Sisters, if you needed to Google that or whatever. It just doesn't show up on Google. It shows up on the Deschutes County Property Information Map.
Here's one of your plans, Kathy.
Yeah, let's see.
So here's the street here, and she has her driveway accessing the garage from the public street, and this behind it is the part of the open space, for example.
That is correct. And so the two lots, 32 and 33, don't have a garage, and they are accessed on a 2-car garage off the alley. So out of the 9 units, 2 of them had to access the public streets on both the north and the south. So imagine a mirror of that unit on the opposite side of the common space.
And this probably doesn't get to it either.
Well,
right?
you do see the house with the garage. That's the common area, and go back up to the top of the picture. The house with the flag, that's the garage door, the door that faces the street. So every unit has a porch facing both the common area and the street, so that every house has two porches, a front and rear porch. So there's common space porches and street facing porches. So there's never like a back of a house facing the public street.
Oh, okay, and that's a good point too. We don't want that.
Yeah, so what you're seeing where the flag is, that's the house that has the garage facing the public street. And then it has another porch on the backside that faces the common area. So if you look to your left, the 2-story house, that's the other side of that same house.
This one here.
I don't see your arrow, but
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, on the lower, yes, that one. That's the other side of the same house with the flag. So you see it has a porch facing the common area, and then it has a porch facing the public street that has a driveway.
Okay, and I can clean the code up to reflect that. And we had talked about that in the past as being needed in the other code as well.
Yeah, because you just never know what kind of lot you're going to wind up with or where it's going to be. And chances are something like this will happen and you can still make it nice. So.
Looks like after Kathy is Mike, then Bill.
Okay, Mike.
You know, I'm just trying to look ahead a little bit. I don't see a lot left in the document that's going to be big, long debate. So just to try to help make this efficient, I wanted to share that. There is one thing, though, that's not part of it that was a big deal on the project with the Habitat Humanity. That project is over 400 feet away from any street. Its access is a long driveway. It shares with a daycare and a second parking lot for an 8-plex off of Portland. The problem, though, is that if people couldn't fit into their garage in the Habitat for Humanity, they could park behind the commercial building in the commercial parking lot. They could trespass. So there was no way to be confident unless we place a guard out there to watch who's parking where. And so in that case, the owner, who I've known for years, agreed to put a fence along the property line so that residents of Habitat for Humanity couldn't then become trespassers and climb a short wall, a rock wall, and as a alternative parking spot. There's nothing in this code about if you're parked next to somebody else's parking lot. There seems like there should be some responsibility on the developer of this project to make sure his tenants are not trespassing next door.
Thank you, Mike. Bill?
Another clarification question. Can driveways be in the setback? It was located against the property line. And if they can, it seems like there should be some sort of fencing requirement or something.
Yeah, I'm going to look at how we wrote it in the cottage development code that we have now about the 5-foot setback. Seems like we were going to allow a trail on that, but there wasn't support. So I just got to look at it and see. I mean, if you did a long driveway for a 4-plex, that can be in the setback. So if it's the alley,
right,
you know, would it, or the driveway access to these cottage homes, would that be much different? But I have to see what we did. I just cannot remember.
Yeah, it just seems like it should be clarified and if the driveway is right on the property line, then maybe there should be some kind of a screening or fencing requirement.
Yeah, we might have done that. I just gotta look.
Audrey is next, and then Mike.
Quick question that I didn't see, and I just may have missed it, but again, back to the garages. If you are doing, like in Monterey Muse, where they have the grouped garages separate from the buildings, how is that covered under this code?
That's in here somewhere. Individual detached garages must not exceed 400 square feet in floor area.
Of each unit or of the building? I mean, that's not even 2 garages, single car. And I love the way they have the bank of garages, 3 to 5. And
This would be individual detached garages, so it'd be per unit.
so you aren't allowed to have a bank of small garages for the cottages?
I would think you could, it's just each one can only be 400. They just don't want to see, like, I don't know why someone did this, but 600 square foot garages per unit.
No, I was just wondering if it's not clear. When I was reading through this before, it was not clear what I was allowed to do for a detached bank of small garages. Yeah, that's essentially it. Thank you. But I don't know if we need you don't want a bank of 20 of them. So I would assume there would be some restriction to that.
So, Pauline, I don't know if you're still looking at stuff. Next would be Mike and then Kathy, if we're ready.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, Mike.
At the Habitat for Humanity project, they have a loop street, a private drive that goes around the outside. Their original design placed that curb on their loop right on the property line, and we walked him over and showed him the obstacles and problems, and he agreed that he should move it back from the property line. And then, of course, we were able to get him to build a fence. So to answer Bill's question, I guess if it's a parking space, there is something in your page draft 8 that I think it says you can't be within the perimeter setback with parking, but it's the private loop which caused us problems. You could say originally they didn't think that was part of the parking, so they resisted, but then they saw the light and moved that private drive 5 feet away.
Kathy?
Kathy.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what Audrey was saying on the size of garages. When they say 200 square feet, that would be the interior. That would not be to the outside framing of a garage, because you need to have the 20 by 20 feet clear. And so by saying, there just needs to be some understanding that either the definition of how you're defining the area of the garage, or you make it a little bit larger, like 441 would be a 21 by 21 rectangle. So, I think a lot of people are just thinking, oh, it's a garage, it's 20 by 20. Well, that's the interior. And usually how we measure buildings is to the exterior framing. So that's why we come up short. I think Audrey, clarify if I'm saying that wrong, but I think that's the issue, is that, like a single car garage, you have framing that frames that space. And so it's actually bigger. So when you have this 400 square feet, you either need to clarify we're talking about the interior, or you make it a larger and you say 441 square feet. So.
And that was for the detached garages?
Yes, because there's framing that makes those garages. They don't, yeah. So anyway.
And that I want to make sure doesn't reside anywhere in.
Or you could just say 400 square feet interior space. That would be fine. Because that's the amount of room you need for a 2-car garage. But
so
it doesn't.
Would be defining floor area different than how we define it in the Bend Development Code.
Okay, so then that's not good. I recognize. It's just that number doesn't work if you actually include the framing.
In the other one, we do 440 square feet.
That's better. Yes.
Okay, and I'm not seeing anything about 400 being a maximum in the OARs. So I think we are okay increasing that to 440 based on the way we measure
Yes,
floor area.
correct. That would be good. Then it's realistic. Thank you.
And we've done that in other.
Next is Audrey, then Bill.
Just another real quick thing on parking. If we're having 12 as a maximum for clusters, I would love to see the parking that's usually limited to 5 contiguous spots. And then a landscape buffer. I would love to see that 6 so that you could do 2 clusters of parking and not have to do a third one for a 12-unit development.
Oh, okay. So that was parking design. So it's saying cluster projects with fewer than 16. So if you have 12, that would, unless I guess you have garages, then this wouldn't really apply, but you're thinking this should be 6.
I would think so. And I would think we would have to have less than 16 if we've got a max of 12, don't we?
Just, so that's where it's confusing.
That's for the
So you
project.
have a cottage cluster project.
Got it. My bad.
Oh, that's okay. It's a lot of the same terms kind of used interchangeably. So then cottage clusters with 16 cottages or more are permitted parking clusters of not more than 8.
Good enough. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good fix. 4
Thank
feet.
you, thank you, Audrey. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, then if you also have 2 of 12, then 8 contiguous spaces, you could do 3. So it all mathematically works out really nicely. So thank you.
So if we were to allow, curious from this group, attached garages, and we're allowing them to be 440 square feet, how many of those could you see being attached without it being overwhelming to the site design? Like 4 is over 1,200 square feet of
I would
building.
think 3, but maybe 3 or 4.
You can have well, I guess 900 square foot footprint plus a 200, so that's 1,100 square foot for the dwelling units. So maybe 3, so it's kind of equivalent to the floor area of the dwelling unit, so it's not much bigger. I don't want the garages to seem much larger than the actual dominant over the dwelling units.
So we have a few hands. Bill's had his up since before you asked that question, Pauline. So I'm guessing it's something else, but then Sarah and Kathy are after that and maybe trying to answer that question.
Okay. Yeah, I have 2 quick things. One is there are several places where you use the term cottage cluster project, and it seems to me it ought to say cottage cluster development because that's the term that's defined in the code. Just a little edit. And the other thing is, in my opinion, even 440 is a bit too small. We have to take into account the fact that the world has lots of pickup trucks, and they are creating a problem in our existing neighborhoods because people cannot literally fit them into the garage. So if we're defining a minimum here or a maximum, the maximum ought to allow for a pickup. And I would think that's probably at least 23 feet deep. You know, maybe it can be a little more generous than that, but 23 by 20 would be 460. So I just think that's something that the city needs to take a look at. If we're going to be restricting parking where the spaces exist, it ought to accommodate the vehicles that people actually own. And let's stop building garages that are too small for the vehicles people have. So
these would be the detached garages, not attached.
Yeah, either way. I mean, I just think we're creating a problem because a good portion of the population owns vehicles that are longer than can fit in what now is an old-fashioned garage.
So architects, what would the size be if it's not 440?
If you were to do one that's 24 deep by 21 wide, that's 504 square feet.
And I would always go to 22 feet because 21 is not dimensioned for lumber. So I'd go 528.
Okay, that makes sense. 528. So why don't you just say 530, round it up?
I'd like to make
So that's more than half of the allowable building footprint for a house.
But we're talking detached garages, right? Not the
It could be right
attached.
on the same property, I assume, just detached.
Well, you're looking not so much at the width as you are the depth. It gives a couple extra feet in depth for the trucks that they're talking about, or to have some storage area.
You know, I'm gonna be a little cynical here.
Okay.
I feel uncomfortable making these things larger because people are driving vehicles that are ungodly large. I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't understand the ginormous how these trucks just keep getting bigger every year, to the point where you need a ladder to climb in them and they don't fit on city streets. And I don't know if like we should have to change some of the stuff to accommodate them. I mean, if someone wants to buy a yacht and then complains that they can't fit yachts in standard garages, then that's their problem. I feel like if you're going to go out and spend $100,000 on a vehicle that's 25 feet long, then you need to realize you probably can't fit it in a standard garage.
I don't know if Sarah's had a chance to speak. Sarah, are you waiting?
Yes, yeah, I am. So I have a standard pickup truck. It's not jacked up and it's not 25 feet long. And the problem here is actually the width of the garage, but also the height of the garage door. So none of the pickup trucks in my neighborhood, which was built in 2007, fit in any of the garages. Not one of them. So I do support more square footage. Plus, we're talking about kayaks and bikes and all those other things that people need places to store. Oh, I also had a question, Pauline. When you were talking about 3 attached garages, was that 3 per the 6 to 12 units, or what was the 3?
So sometimes they put the garages in a separate location than the actual house. And if they want to attach them, we would allow 3 units garages to be attached.
Okay.
So if it helps, it would be like no more than 3 garages clustered together in a separate place than all the houses. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah,
Sarah.
I'm just thinking about the new development right across from us that has like a bank of garages, and I think there's a dozen of them for an apartment complex. So I'm just trying to
Yeah, it would be like that. So how many are attached for that?
So it would be a limit of 3 to be attached to each other?
Yeah, and then there'd be a space and then 3 more in a space. I think the intent is to not have this cottage cluster development be about the garages and not look like all garage. Like the parking spaces are broken up. There's a limit on the size of the garage that's dedicated towards the building footprint. So I think the intent was to not make this all about the cars and the big trucks.
Right.
I can go by and take the pictures of the 2 in our neighborhood. It's rare I see cars out in them to begin with. They only have single car garages because I have to pick my daughter up at 1 sometimes. And there's only 3 parking spots. I pull right into a parking spot because they're never taken. But if the group wants to bump the detached garages up to 550 square feet, again, that is more than half of the allowable building footprint of the house.
And just one last question. If we're going up to 440 or 540, anything over 200 comes out of the total square footage, correct?
Only if it's attached.
Okay.
So this will encourage detached garages, and I don't know what detached is. I think it's 6 feet from the primary dwelling unit.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Scott, then Kathy.
Whoops, I forgot to put my hand down.
Okay, good. Then I'm going to talk because I have to go soon. So I've done a project where each unit had a single car garage, and we did 4 in a row, and then had 4 parking spaces on the surface, and then another 4. And so it would be essentially 2 of these 2-car garages together, and I think that would be appropriate rather than 3. I have a feeling that these cottages are going to wind up having single car garages and not double car garages. So I would limit it to either 4 single car garages or 2 2-car garages before you need a break. That would be, I think, an attractive and appropriate size.
Well, maybe we just put a maximum square footage of the structure of attached garages. And so if you did 2, if it's a single car, it's, I'm just gonna use easy math, 200 square feet per each. So you're 600, or you said 4 of them, so that'd be 800. So should we just say 800?
Well, except that you're not taking into consideration the framing. So, because that's just the clear space for each car. So,
1,000.
So for instance, if we were doing what we were talking about before, getting a little bit bigger, that was 528. If it was times 2, it'd be 1,056. So Audrey has got her hand up. I think she can help me out here. But yeah, just keep in mind that there's framing that goes around these garages. They're not really 200 and they're not 400.
That, I mean, if you go with just 200 or even 220, you're dealing with the smallest. You now have no shear strength on either side of the door. It's really an expensive and not very useful way to go. I would much rather allow, I'm like, if you're going to either do the 528 times 3 as your max, or go a little smaller so that you can maybe do 4 slightly larger single car garages. So there's at least function and a little bit of storage in them as well.
But what's the overall size then, Audrey?
So like if you did, I would love to see a maximum of a 24 by 16 garage. If you did 3 of those, it's 1152. If you did 4 of them, and I would love to see groups of 4 allowed.
That makes more sense.
Splits into the 12 again. That's 1536 square feet as a maximum per building.
And what was your initial size of the garage? That seems small.
24 by 16 as a nice functional single car with storage, with good shear walls on either side of the garage door.
So reduce it, because the model code uses 400 and you're going down to 384.
Well, she's talking about a single car garage versus a 2-car garage, right?
Right. We're not going to write it that if you're doing a single, it's this. If you're doing a double, this. If you're doing a triple,
400 times 4.
Do 384 times
400. Stick with the 400 and go 400 times 4. 1,600 max building size. Then if you had 3 of the 528s, you're at 1584.
Okay, I need to chime in here because Matt Gillette last time was very insistent that these garages, if they're a 2-car garage, have to be 440.
Right, that's right, because and that's what we did in the other cottage code was 440. So what's,
I think what Aubrey's trying to argue is the max size of the 3 attached. So
correct.
Do you want to add a sentence or a section that says your 3 attached can't be bigger than X?
That'll be 1,600 square feet, and they can divvy it up however they want.
Right.
Yeah,
but I think this one needs to be 440.
But yes. Why did he need it at 440? Is that because of the parking space requirement being the 20 feet long instead of a 19? I'm wondering if one will fix the other.
It has to be that big in order to build it. It was a big, long discussion, and I can't articulate it without him here.
And let's do the 440 for now, because I can't promise that we're going to reduce the parking spot with this code update. And this is consistent with what we actually exempt 440 square feet on the other cottage code, whereas this one we're only doing 200, but the 440 dimension is consistent.
Uh-huh. That makes sense to me. I've got to go, guys. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. And I'll make some changes, clean this up. I'd really like to, on the 17th, I'll send out the next meeting date, which might be the 17th. We need to start tackling all those little loose ends so that I can get a draft together and get this out for public review.
Perfect.
We
So,
can all wear
appreciate
green.
Later.
Bye.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you, everyone. Good job.
To everybody, yes.
This is a challenge.
Kind of fun.
It's interesting.